The backstage area of New York Fashion Week buzzed with electric energy as models, designers, and industry elite prepared for one of the season's most anticipated shows. Amidst the chaos of hairspray clouds, clicking heels, and barked instructions, a woman in her 50s sat quietly in a corner chair, wearing simple jeans and a plain white t-shirt. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, and she clutched a worn leather messenger bag close to her chest. To most observers, she looked completely out of place among the haute couture and diamond accessories that surrounded her. What happened next would leave everyone completely speechless. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones who dress the simplest. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers around the world. And if you enjoy stories about celebrities showing grace under pressure, make sure to subscribe because we have another incredible encounter story dropping tomorrow. The venue was Lincoln Center's most prestigious fashion hall, transformed into a glittering temple of style and status. Photographers lined the runway like soldiers, their cameras ready to capture every sequin and strut. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the nervous energy that comes with high-stakes events where careers can be made or destroyed in a single moment. Sandra Bullock, though few recognized her without the Hollywood glamour, had arrived early for what she thought would be a quiet observation of the fashion world. She was researching for an upcoming role and wanted to understand the industry from the inside. Her publicist had arranged for her to have backstage access, but in typical Sandra fashion, she'd insisted on keeping things low-key. No entourage, no special treatment, just a chance to watch and learn. The backstage area resembled a beautiful battlefield. Racks of designer gowns worth more than most people's houses lined the walls, while makeup artists worked with the precision of surgeons to create faces that would photograph perfectly under the harsh runway lights. Models, tall as skyscrapers and just as imposing, moved through the space with practiced ease, their faces already set in the blank, fierce expressions that would soon captivate the audience. Sandra found herself a quiet spot near the accessories table, hoping to observe without interfering. She pulled out a small notebook and began jotting down details about the organized chaos around her. The way assistants moved with military precision, how models transformed from regular people into walking art pieces, the hierarchy that was evident in every interaction. It was all fascinating material for her character development. "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" The voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. Sandra looked up to see three models approaching her, their faces twisted with a mixture of confusion and disdain. The leader of the group was a statuesque blonde who couldn't have been older than 25, her cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass and her eyes cold as winter steel. "I'm sorry," Sandra replied politely, closing her notebook and offering a gentle smile. "This is a restricted area," the blonde continued, her voice dripping with condescension. "Assistants and wannabes aren't supposed to be back here. Did you get lost looking for the cleaning supplies?" The two models flanking her, a brunette with severe bangs and a redhead whose lips were painted crimson, giggled at the comment. Their laughter had a cruel edge that made several nearby crew members glance over uncomfortably. Sandra's smile never wavered. "Oh, I think there might be some confusion. I have permission to be here. I'm just observing quietly. I won't get in anyone's way." The blonde model, whose name tag read Vivienne, stepped closer, her towering height casting a shadow over Sandra's seated figure. "Permission? From who?" "Because, honey, I've been modeling for 8 years, and I know every important person in this industry. I don't know you, which means you're nobody." "That's Vivienne Chen," whispered a makeup artist to her colleague. "She's walked for every major designer in the past 3 years, completely full of herself." "And that's exactly the problem with people like you," Vivienne continued, her voice growing louder and attracting more attention. "You think you can just waltz into our world because you probably read some article about Fashion Week. This isn't dress-up time, sweetheart. This is serious business where millions of dollars are on the line." Sandra remained seated, her posture relaxed despite the growing crowd of onlookers. "You're absolutely right," that this is serious business. I have tremendous respect for what you all do. The artistry, the discipline, the pressure you handle. It's remarkable. Her gracious response only seemed to fuel Vivienne's aggression. Don't patronize me with your fake compliments. You're sitting there in your Walmart clothes, taking notes like some kind of reporter, probably planning to sell stories to tabloids about what happens backstage. The brunette model, Madison, chimed in with a sneer. Look at her bag. It's literally falling apart, and those jeans have seen better days. I mean, at least try to look the part if you're going to sneak into Fashion Week. The third model, Scarlett, examined Sandra's appearance with theatrical disgust. It's honestly offensive. We work our entire lives to be here, maintaining impossible standards, and then people like her just show up thinking they belong. It's disrespectful to everyone who's earned their place. By now, a significant crowd had gathered. Other models, photographers, assistants, and crew members formed a loose circle around the confrontation. Some looked embarrassed by the scene, while others seemed entertained by the drama. A few pulled out phones, sensing that something noteworthy was happening. Sandra stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. Even at her full height, she was dwarfed by the models surrounding her, but there was something in her bearing that commanded attention. I understand you're protective of your space and your industry. That's actually admirable. You should be proud of what you've accomplished. Spare us the therapy session, Vivienne snapped. Just tell us who you really are and what you're doing here before I call security. I'm someone who believes that how we treat others, especially when we think they can't help us or hurt us, reveals who we really are, Sandra replied quietly. Success isn't just about what we achieve, it's about who we become in the process of achieving it. Madison laughed harshly. Oh, please, save the motivational speaker routine for someone who cares. You're probably some failed actress or model who couldn't make it, and now you're trying to write a tell-all book or something. The real question, Scarlett added, is how someone like you even got back here in the first place. Security at these events is supposed to be tight. Maybe you should consider a career in breaking and entering, since you're obviously good at getting where you don't belong. The cruelty in their words was making other people in the vicinity visibly uncomfortable. A senior photographer shook his head in disgust, and several crew members exchanged worried glances. The energy in the room was shifting, and not in the model's favor. Sandra absorbed their words with remarkable composure, her expression remaining kind despite the verbal assault. I've learned that when people are cruel to others, it usually says more about their own pain than about the person they're targeting. We all have moments when we feel insecure or threatened, and sometimes we lash out at people who seem safe to attack. Oh my God, she's actually giving us a psychology lecture, Vivienne said, turning to address the growing crowd. Can you believe this? This random nobody crashes our workspace and then has the audacity to analyze us like she's some kind of expert on human behavior. Maybe she thinks if she sounds smart enough, we'll forget that she doesn't belong here, Madison added. Newsflash, wisdom without success is just poverty with pretty words. The comment drew some gasps from the onlookers. Even by Fashion Week standards, the attack was becoming unnecessarily personal and mean-spirited. Sandra's eyes showed a flash of something. Not anger, but perhaps sadness at witnessing such unnecessary cruelty. Success means different things to different people. For some, it's about external validation, wealth, or fame. For others, it's about inner peace, meaningful relationships, or making a positive impact on the world. Neither approach is wrong, but one tends to bring more lasting happiness than the other. Listen, Oprah, Scarlett said with venom, keep your philosophical bullshit to yourself. This is the real world where beauty, talent, and connections matter. Your little pep talk might work on desperate housewives, but we live in reality. The situation was escalating beyond uncomfortable into genuinely disturbing territory. Several crew members were now openly staring at the confrontation, their faces showing disgust at the model's behavior. A photographer nearby was shaking his head and muttering to his assistant about the entitled attitude of some of these girls. Just then, a commotion near the backstage entrance drew everyone's attention. Security guards were clearing a path, and crew members were straightening up and looking alert. Someone important was arriving. "That must be the surprise guest they've been whispering about all week," someone whispered. Through the crowd came a figure that made every head turn. Keanu Reeves, dressed in his characteristic understated style, but carrying himself with the quiet authority that had made him beloved by millions. His presence immediately changed the energy in the room. Conversations stopped, phones appeared, and even the most jaded industry veterans straightened up. But Keanu wasn't looking at the crowd of admirers forming around him. His eyes had found Sandra across the room, and his face broke into a genuine smile of delight. "Sandy!" he called out, his voice carrying across the backstage area with obvious affection and warmth. The entire room seemed to freeze. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Phones that had been recording the confrontation now swiveled to capture this unexpected moment. The three models who had been tormenting Sandra felt their faces drain of color as the implications began to sink in. Keanu made his way through the crowd with easy confidence, ignoring the whispered requests for selfies and autographs. His focus was entirely on Sandra, and his smile was the kind reserved for genuinely beloved friends. "I was hoping you'd be here," he said as he reached her, pulling her into a warm, brotherly hug. "How's the research going for the new project?" The silence in the backstage area was deafening. Every person within earshot was processing the same shocking realization. The woman they'd just witnessed being humiliated was not only someone Keanu Reeves knew personally, but someone he clearly cared about deeply. Sandra returned his hug with obvious affection, her composure never having cracked despite the ordeal she'd just endured. "It's been educational," she said with a slight smile that held worlds of meaning. Keanu's perceptive eyes took in the scene around them, the crowd of onlookers, the uncomfortable expressions on crew members' faces, and the three models who were now standing frozen like deer in headlights. His expression grew more serious as he began to piece together what had been happening. "I hope everyone has been treating you well," he said, his voice still friendly but with an undertone that suggested he suspected otherwise. Vivian, Madison, and Scarlett were experiencing what could only be described as a collective panic attack. The woman they had spent the last 20 minutes verbally attacking was not only friends with one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, but was clearly someone of significance herself. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and the picture they formed was absolutely mortifying. "Sandra Bullock," whispered someone in the crowd, the name rippling through the backstage area like wildfire. "Oh my God, that's Sandra Bullock," another voice confirmed. "The Sandra Bullock," added a third. The Academy Award-winning actress, the woman who had starred in some of the most beloved films of the past 3 decades. The Hollywood A-lister who was known for her kindness and professionalism. She had been sitting quietly in their midst while 3 young models attacked her for not belonging. Vivian felt her legs go weak. Madison's face had turned several shades paler than her foundation. Scarlett looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The magnitude of their mistake was beginning to dawn on them, and with it came the terrifying realization of what this could mean for their careers. Keanu, ever perceptive, was reading the room with growing understanding. His eyes moved from Sandra's composed face to the 3 models who were now visibly shaking, and his expression grew colder. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his voice taking on a protective edge that everyone in the vicinity could hear. Sandra, displaying the grace that had made her beloved by colleagues throughout her career, placed a gentle hand on Keanu's arm. "Everything's fine," she said quietly. "Just a case of mistaken identity that I'm sure these lovely young women will learn from." Her generosity in that moment was stunning. Despite having been subjected to 20 minutes of verbal abuse, despite being humiliated in front of dozens of industry professionals, she was offering the 3 models a way out. She was giving them an opportunity to apologize and move forward without completely destroying their careers. But the damage was already done in terms of the room's perception. Every person who had witnessed the confrontation was looking at Vivienne, Madison, and Scarlett with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. In an industry where reputation is everything, their behavior had just been exposed in the worst possible way. Vivienne finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Miss Bullock, we didn't know." "That's the point," Sandra replied gently but firmly. "You didn't know who I was, so you felt it was acceptable to treat me cruelly. But how we treat people when we think they can't help us or hurt us, that's who we really are." The lesson was landing with devastating accuracy. Everyone in the vicinity was absorbing the truth of her words, and many were probably examining their own behavior in similar situations. Madison stepped forward, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "We were so wrong. I can't believe I'm so sorry. There's no excuse for how we acted." Scarlett was openly crying now, the weight of her behavior and its potential consequences crashing down on her. "Please, Miss Bullock, we're so sorry. We were awful to you, and you didn't deserve any of that." Keanu watched this exchange with interest, his protective instincts still alert, but his respect for Sandra's handling of the situation evident. He knew her well enough to trust her judgment in how to proceed. Sandra looked at each of the three young women, her expression compassionate despite what they had put her through. "The fashion industry is incredibly competitive and stressful. I understand that can make people defensive and sometimes cruel, but you have the power to choose who you want to be, whether you want to lift others up or tear them down." "We want to lift people up," Vivienne said quickly, her voice thick with emotion. We were scared and stupid, and we took it out on you. That's not who we want to be." "Then don't be that person," Sandra replied simply. "You're all clearly talented and successful. You don't need to diminish others to shine brighter. There's room for everyone to succeed." The transformation in the three models was visible. The arrogance and cruelty that had defined them just minutes earlier had been replaced by genuine remorse and, perhaps more importantly, understanding. They were seeing themselves clearly for the first time, and they didn't like what they saw. Keanu finally spoke up, his voice warm but carrying the weight of his own hard-earned wisdom. "I've been fortunate to work with Sandra on multiple projects over the years, and I can tell you that she's exactly the same person off-screen as she appears to be on-screen. Kind, professional, and more talented than she gives herself credit for. But more than that, she's someone who makes everyone around her better." His words carried tremendous weight in that room. Keanu Reeves endorsing someone's character was like receiving a seal of approval from the most trusted source in Hollywood. "The fact that she's willing to offer you grace after how you treated her tells you everything you need to know about who she is," he continued. "I hope you'll remember this moment not just as an embarrassing mistake, but as a chance to become better people." The three models nodded eagerly, their faces showing genuine transformation. They understood that they had been given an incredible gift, the opportunity to learn and grow from their mistake, rather than simply being destroyed by it. As the initial shock began to wear off, other people in the backstage area started approaching Sandra, not as fans seeking selfies, but as industry professionals showing the respect she had always deserved. Photographers who had witnessed the confrontation were shaking their heads in disgust at the model's earlier behavior, while expressing admiration for Sandra's grace under pressure. A senior designer who had been watching from across the room approached the group. "Ms. Bullock, I want to apologize on behalf of our industry. What you just experienced is not representative of who we strive to be. Your dignity in handling that situation is inspiring." Sandra smiled warmly at him. "Thank you, but honestly, I think what happened here today might end up being more valuable than a dozen positive interactions. Sometimes we need to see our worst selves to inspire our best selves." Keanu nodded in agreement. "That's very Sandra, finding the silver lining and the teaching moment even in difficult situations." As the immediate drama began to settle, the three models found themselves surrounded by other industry professionals who wanted to understand what had just happened. The whispered conversations and pointed looks made it clear that their behavior had been noticed and judged by everyone present. But rather than defensive or angry, all three seemed genuinely reflective about their actions. They huddled together, talking quietly about what they had learned and how they wanted to change their behavior going forward. Vivienne approached Sandra one more time, her earlier arrogance completely gone. "Miss Bullock, I know we already apologized, but I want you to know that this has been a wake-up call for all of us. We've been so focused on protecting our positions that we forgot basic human decency. The industry can be brutal, Sandra acknowledged. It's easy to become defensive and territorial. But you're all young and talented. You have time to build careers based on lifting others up rather than tearing them down. Madison wiped away her tears and nodded earnestly. We want to do better. Is there any way we can make this right? Sandra considered the question thoughtfully. The best way to make this right is to remember this feeling the next time you encounter someone you don't recognize or someone who seems different from you. Ask yourself, am I treating this person with the dignity that every human being deserves? We will, Scarlett promised, and we'll make sure other people in our industry hear this story, not to humiliate ourselves, but to remind everyone that we're all human beings first. Keanu had been listening to this conversation with obvious approval. That's the kind of growth that actually matters, he said. It's not about perfection. It's about being willing to learn and change when you realize you've been wrong. As the backstage preparations for the fashion show continued around them, the energy had completely shifted. What had started as an ugly confrontation had become a powerful lesson in human dignity, grace under pressure, and the possibility of redemption. Sandra spent the rest of her time backstage being treated with the respect she had always deserved, engaging in meaningful conversations with designers, photographers, and yes, even models who were curious about her upcoming projects and her perspective on their industry. The three models who had attacked her spent their time reflecting on their behavior and, more importantly, observing how Sandra interacted with others. They watched her show genuine interest in a young intern's career goals, saw her compliment a nervous new model on her walk, and witnessed her thank every crew member by name for their hard work. She's everything we pretended to be, Vivienne whispered to her companions as they watched Sandra encourage a struggling model who was having trouble with her dress. Confident, successful, but still kind to everyone. And she could have destroyed our careers with one phone call, Madison added quietly, but instead she chose to teach us something. We need to be more like her, Scarlett concluded. Not just successful, but good people. As the fashion show itself began and models took their turns on the runway, the three who had confronted Sandra carried themselves differently. Their walks were still professional and fierce, but there was something more grounded about their presence, something more authentic. When Vivienne's turn came to walk the runway, she spotted Sandra in the audience. Keanu had arranged for her to have a front row seat. For just a moment, their eyes met, and Sandra offered her an encouraging smile and a small nod. The gesture nearly brought Vivienne to tears, but she channeled the emotion into her walk, delivering one of the most genuine and powerful presentations of her career. After the show, as the backstage area buzzed with the excitement of a successful event, Sandra prepared to leave. She had gotten the research she came for and much more. The experience had reminded her of the importance of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their position or power. Keanu walked her toward the exit, their conversation easy and comfortable as always. I'm proud of how you handled that situation, he told her. Not everyone would have shown that much grace. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow, Sandra replied. Those young women made a mistake, but they're not bad people. They just lost sight of what's important for a while. That's what I've always admired about you, Keanu said. You see the best in people, even when they're not showing you their best. As they reached the exit, they were intercepted by Vivienne, Madison, and Scarlett, who had changed out of their show outfits and were clearly waiting to speak with Sandra one final time. Ms. Bullock, Vivienne began, her voice steady but emotional, we wanted to catch you before you left. We've been talking, and we want you to know that today changed us, not just because of who you are, but because of how you treated us. We realize that success without kindness is just hollow achievement, Madison added. You showed us what real grace looks like. Scarlett nodded earnestly. We're going to be different from now on. Better. And if anyone ever asks us what professionalism looks like, we're going to tell them about today, about how you could have destroyed us but chose to educate us instead. Sandra looked at each of them with genuine warmth. I believe you will be better. Today was hard for all of us, but sometimes the most difficult moments are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. Thank you for giving us a second chance, Vivienne said quietly. Everyone deserves a second chance, Sandra replied. What you do with yours is up to you. As Sandra and Keanu finally left the venue, the backstage area continued to buzz with conversations about what had transpired. The story would spread throughout the fashion industry within hours, but rather than being remembered as a tale of celebrity humiliation, it would become a story about grace, growth, and the power of treating others with dignity. The three models would go on to have successful careers, but more importantly, they would become known for their kindness and professionalism. They would mentor younger models, speak out against bullying in the industry, and always remember the lesson they learned from a woman in jeans and a t-shirt who turned out to be one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Years later, when asked about that day at Fashion Week, Vivienne would say, I learned that how you treat someone when you think they can't help you reveals who you really are. Sandra Bullock taught me that true success isn't about how high you rise, but about whether you remember to lift others up with you. The story became legendary in fashion circles, not as gossip or scandal, but as a reminder of the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. It served as a wake-up call for an industry that sometimes loses sight of basic human decency in pursuit of beauty and success. And Sandra Bullock? She went on to deliver another memorable performance in her upcoming film, drawing on her research from Fashion Week and her understanding of human nature to create a character that resonated with audiences worldwide. But perhaps more importantly, she continued to be exactly who she had always been. A reminder that true star power comes not from demanding respect, but from earning it through kindness, grace, and treating every person you meet as worthy of dignity. The lesson of that day at Fashion Week extended far beyond the fashion industry. In a world where people are often judged by their appearance, their perceived status, or their ability to help us achieve our goals, Sandra Bullock's grace under pressure served as a reminder that our true character is revealed not in how we treat those who can benefit us, but in how we treat those who seemingly cannot. As Keanu had observed, Sandra made everyone around her better. Not through lectures or demands, but through example. She showed three young women what it looked like to respond to cruelty with compassion, to meet arrogance with humility, and to turn a moment of humiliation into an opportunity for growth. The fashion show that day showcased beautiful clothes and talented models, but the real beauty was found in a woman who chose grace over revenge, education over embarrassment, and hope over hatred. In doing so, she reminded everyone present that the most influential people are often not the ones demanding attention, but the ones quietly making the world a better place through their actions and their choices. That's the power of treating others with dignity. It doesn't just change them, it changes us. And sometimes it changes an entire room full of people who witness what grace under pressure really looks like. So the next time you encounter someone who seems different from you, someone who doesn't fit your idea of belonging, someone who appears to have less power or status than you do, remember Sandra Bullock in her jeans and t-shirt, showing a room full of fashion industry professionals what true influence really looks like. Because in the end, we're all just human beings trying to make our way in the world, and how we treat each other along the way is what defines us far more than any title, achievement, or designer outfit ever could.